Namaste. So, this is a interesting poem. It's the dual being. We think of ourselves as me, and what is this me? If you ask the question, it will be very difficult to define because this me is all the time changing. Morning it's I am angry. No, morning it may be better. I am happy. In the afternoon, oh, I'm feeling very sullen. In the evening, I'm depressed. I'm hungry. If you see, there is constantly ever shifting I. So, this chaotic mass, slowly over a period of time, nature individualizes and creates a sense of this is me. That's the ego individuality, where you define yourself. And that is the construction nature does over millenniums. A human being has to go through many lives to become an I. That's why I individuality is so precious. That any effort to finish it, stifle it, is absolutely asuric and counterproductive. Shobindo speaks of it, I think the other day we had read, that it is, people think that if you give individuality and freedom, it's dangerous. He said far less dangerous than if it is crushed or stifled. An individual, what will he do? Maximum damage. An individual, he will live with his own, what you may call as eccentric, crazy ideas. But if the state completely crushes your will and faith, which is the bedrock of evolution, all evolution proceeds on that basis. Otherwise, there would be no yoga. Everybody will evolve suddenly. So it is very, very dangerous. The state control of an individual will and faith. This is what communism tries to do. And unfortunately, this is what sometimes in our over enthusiasm, over eagerness, we try to do with all misspelt goodwill, if at all. So, this is one individual within us whom, after a long time, we say, this is me. And that's what is called as personality. We are identified with it. But there is another I behind this I of which we are normally not aware. So Shobindo is reminding us of this, the dual being. We have this idea or rather experience of the two birds in Mundak Upanishad, Dvasuparna. So there is the common tree, the tree of life, tree of creation, manifested universe, in which there are two birds. One bird is sitting below, eating the fruit and taking its sweet, bitter, whatever its taste is, says, oh, this is very nice, tasty. Or after some, oh, this is bitter. And there is another one which is sitting above, which is just watching. So this bird which is eating the fruit is having the taste of sweet, bitter stuff. Then suddenly it turns its eyes above and sees this other bird, which is watching. And it feels joy and a sense of freedom. So this is the experience in yoga. One of the first fundamental experiences that come is of this dual being. There are two beings in my single self. They are parts of one large totality. Sri Aurobindo is not taking that attitude that this is not me. He is saying it is also me, but this is totality in which there are two beings. A Godhead watches nature from behind, at play in front with a brilliant surface elf, a time-born creature with a human mind. So one being is the Godhead who is the witness, the watching, the Dvasuparna, the one who is sitting above and watching this play. And what is happening in front? Nature and this little elf are playing like, what is that? Mickey Mouse, Tom and Jerry story. That is going on. And this fellow is watching and saying, oh, this. Sometimes it's amusing, sometimes it's stupid, sometimes it's foolish, sometimes it's good, So this is watching. One is watching this play. So one of the first things required in yoga is to learn to step back and separate and observe the field and what's going on. We learn a lot from that. This is called becoming a student of oneself. But it needs time. It needs that we sit, spend some time in reflecting. One of the places the mother says that every night we should look at the day and see how was it, what were the motives, what made us do what we did, what made us feel the way we did. So what we present in front of the world is a different story altogether. But we should take a look at ourselves. Sometimes there is a need for a very hard look. A Godhead watches nature from behind, at play in front with a brilliant surface self. We have this idea, I'm very brilliant. What is this fellow? I'm a highly educated, qualified person. I'm this, I'm that. But what is it? A time-born creature with a human mind. Imagine gods watching our play. Oh, he's so good, huh? He thinks he's so good. All is the inpouring of that light, that sweetness, that might. Tranquil and boundless like a sea or sky. This inner self, the true self within us. What are the signs by which you can recognize? When you touch that core, you will be tranquil. You'll be vast. And that is like a feeling of being oceanic. Feeling of being vast as the universe, as the ocean, as the sky. The Godhead knows himself eternity's son. And you know yourself always that I am a portion of the eternal. I am the child of the eternal. Mame Vansh, what Shri Krishna says. So when you know it, all fear passes away. One of the first things that happens when one has God realization, and it's a sign one can almost say that you can know a person has realized the divine by the fact that there is no fear. Especially the fear of death completely goes away. Why? Because you know you are eternity's son. So this true self is tranquil and boundless like a sea or sky. The Godhead knows itself, eternity's son, radiant his mind and vast, his heart as free. His will is a sceptre of dominion. So, how to recognize these two selves? This one is vast as the sky or the sea. It is tranquil. Its mind is luminous. Its heart is free. Free from all attachment, all grief, all freed from that. That's its nature. Effortlessly. And the mind is radiant, luminous, vast, not confused. How do we find out this? What is this? What is that? Whatever one wants, that light descends and reveals. And the will is a sceptre of dominion. What a language. So sceptre is like a, dand. People use, that the royalties, the regal people, they have this as a sign. He is the king who is coming. So it is a sceptre of dominion. It knows that it decides, and what it decides, that will be. So it can even decide, no, I don't want to die. And death will wait. That is how the interesting stories we have spoken about Queen Elizabeth's story, where she says, but death can wait. There are such examples. When we realize the psychic being, we can actually, in a way, it is ikshamrityu. You can always say that, no, I don't want to die now. And there are ways and means you can. Of course, you'll never say the way we understand. Oh, very good, no? Nice to have ikshamrityu. So, you can decide when to die. It is not like that. It's not done under individual caprice. Ki, my son is going to come from London. So, I have got ikshamrityu vardhan. Let me wait for him to arrive. The person who has realized this state will tell his son in advance, when I leave, don't have to do the drama of coming and Agni and all these stuff. The day I leave, I go to her. Don't worry who has come, who has not come, who will give Agni, Mukh Agni, and this Agni and Sir Agni. All these rules don't apply. Because you are free. When you go, you just say Tata bye bye. That's it. Even that you may not, because you are looking at her. Why would you bother? As if you are waiting for, see, that is the surface self. My son, has he come or not come? Poor fellow. No, set them free. Tell them, please. Let them at least have a good time. Otherwise, is to, now think, oh my God, Papa has gone, now I have to go. So, this is the state of inner freedom where you are completely a different being altogether. You are like a master, a lord. Ish. I have some people's death, you can see it even in the dead body, what we call as a dead body. One experience I remember is seeing Pranab Das' body when he had left the body. I don't know. Did you have that opportunity? No. Achha, you were there. So, when I heard about it, being the doctor as one of the first persons to know, the news had not yet gone. And I had the impression that suddenly that there was one last pillar which was supporting the ashram's outer structure that has been taken away. This was my experience. Then something new will emerge, but that process had started. But I walked inside, where his body was lying in state. Can't imagine. Before that, when you see him when he was not well or going through whatever, yes, you have regard for him. All that is fine. And you experience something beautiful. But that moment, it was not a body. Body, of course, had a pinkish, creamish glow. But it was a mighty being behind, like a Raja. It was such a power. Tremendous power. First time one could understand, first time I saw what power was within him, which the Divine Mother had brought down. Such a power that, it was like enough to dissolve all kinds of forces, that kind of power. Directly I'm saying that when I went inside, such a tremendous power. Mighty power. And it was like, you hear about many armed goddesses. So he was a mighty god. Radiant and effulgent with all his might. And the body was just a small little thing which was there only to support that presence. And it was so strong that one could get a heaviness if one, were to stay long. This was the experience. There are people who had experience about Nalnida when he departed. That constantly there is a blue glow here which is moving all around. Now it's not about that watching this or not, it's not about those miracles. But there is an inner being which you can't know from the outer surface personality. Outer surface personality is different. It is a temporary thing created for the play. It is like a role one has assumed. So when you are playing a role, you limit yourself to that role. It's like a mighty warrior. He plays the role with his child. He is teaching the child a trick or two. He is not going to fight with all his prowess. Sometimes he will fall down. Sometimes the child will fall down. But if there is an actual battle, then you will see the full splendor and full glow. So the same thing, that there is this inner being, inner self in us, which is true, which is vast, which is tranquil, which is boundless, luminous, radiant, heart freed from all grief. It is always in a state of peace and joy. And there is this outer self which we unfortunately regard as me. But that is only a temporary construct in a life. Unfortunately, that is the only thing people notice. After you depart, all kinds of things will come out based for the outer little thing, which has no meaning at all. So, how do you recognize the outer one? This achievement, that achievement, this the person did, that the person did. Nothing. All that is gone. That's broken by nature. But that inner being, inner self, that is the one which continues on the journey. Not the inner being, the inner self. Inner being is a meeting point between the inner self and this outer personality. The smaller self by nature's passions driven. Look at the paradox. Here is the Lord. Inner self is the Lord. Its will is a sceptre. It is that which decides. Real decision. That's why, people suddenly, for instance, people come to the ashram, they leave behind everything suddenly. If you ask, is it a logical decision? Even their own surface mind will say, I don't know. But there is this inner self which has taken the plunge. So that is the inner self. But outer personality, this smaller self, by nature's passions driven, thoughtful and erring, learns his human task. It makes mistakes, it tries to think. You see, that's what two classic examples, Dilip Kumar Roy, Aurobindo tells him that you are I have cherished you as son and friend. Can you imagine? He could never understand why is he saying all this to me. But outwardly, those who saw Dilip Kumar Roy, they could never understand. Okay, he is a great singer and author and poet, but what is so about him, such about him? He had doubts even about the mothers coming, he had his own issues, but Aurobindo always saw in him that bhakta. Because that's what his inner self was and continues to be. So this difference, Nirodha asked Aurobindo, why have you given this special grace to me? What did Aurobindo say? Find it out, find it out. Discover it yourself. And he says, I could not discover it. So this is the inner self and this is the outer limited personality. So the smaller self by nature's passions driven, thoughtful and erring, learns his human task. All must be known and to that greatness given. His mind and life, the mirror and the mask. So what is its job? Job description of this smaller self. He must learn all these little things, aspects of this creation in his manifoldedness and pass it on to this inner self through which it goes to the Lord. This is what it is there for. It is not me, but yet it must enter into all kinds of fields. Always. So this is the image of the Krishna and Arjuna. So there is the outer personality which is driven by passions, ignorance, error. And there is the inner self which is the divine Krishna seated within. There are several images people use. That's not important. The point is just to know that there are two beings within us. And together they form one. So I can be either on this, identified with this, then I'll weep and laugh and feel the sting of life. Or I can be identified with this when I can be the Lord, Isha. But then what about this? Now in traditional yoga it is said when you are identified with this, its purpose is over. You will continue to do action under the impulsion of past. And the time comes when this outer personality is deconstructed and broken and cast aside. But in this yoga, it is used as an instrument for this inner self. Because that's the one which is holding all the different elements of nature together. He is the manager. So it is not like, okay, I have nothing to do with manager, I have realized I am the Malik. What kind of a Malik who doesn't take care of his domain? So this outer personality, the outer self is the manager, not the owner of the house. So all must be known and to that greatness given, his mind and life, the mirror and the mask. How beautifully. It should become a polished true mirror. Our mind and life should reflect the divine. But it doesn't. It's a distorted mirror. And very often it's a mask. It veils the divine. So when we look at ourselves, look at people, we see the mask and not the reality that is behind. As with the figure of a cymbal dance, the screened omniscient plays at ignorance. So beautiful it is. Cymbal dance. So in dance, nowadays it comes, I think, on reality shows where one is the master and the other is the student. Isn't it? Nowadays this program comes. So the game is such that the master has to train the student and bring the student to the level of perfection at which the master is. So these are the two beings. One is the master and the other is the student. So this has to screen himself and play at ignorance. The master can't tell the student, dance the way he dance, I dance, just look at me and start the process. He cannot do that. He has to start with the basics step by step, which includes exercises, food, everything, training. Then a time will come. And what is the time? When this master who knows all the steps of the dance will bring the student to a level of perfection. And the best masters are such, ideally masters should be such that at the end of the whole training period the world should say, is he the student? Or so much there should be an identification that there should be no difference. The master will know the difference, and those who are real parkhis will know the difference. But there should be so much of oneness between them that people just wonder, really? I mean, if you don't see the age and the bodily frame, that who is the master? Because the master and the pupil grow one. And but for that, the master has to come down, plays at ignorance, screens himself. He doesn't first day say, okay, come, let's do salsa. And Bharatnatyam. Okay. Both are beautiful in their own ways. But that's not how it, at the end you see that perfection. So there is this outer being which is prone to error, stumbling, everything. But it is under the tutorship of the inner self. And through lives it is slowly building up this part which is identified with nature until it becomes one with its Lord. Now there is, this image is also described in Aurobindo's yoga as the psychic being and the central being, where the psychic being is that part of the soul which is Jivatma, which is identified with mind and body and life. So it has forgotten itself. And the central being which is always free, which knows itself as the Lord's child. So when we discover, then we know, okay, this is the purpose. So what is the difference? The difference is, imagine that you are made to suddenly dance morning and evening, but you don't know who is making me dance and why I am being made to dance. So you end up cursing fate, you end up cursing, Arey kya hai? You are driven by all kinds of passions, desires, make a mess of life. And you say, kya hai zindagi mein? Why is this happening? But when you discover the inner self, the true self, then you say, okay, training, huh? Yes, this is not trained, go. Train yourself. So you train. And then you have to say, oops, I did it again. So again, this is the process in which through lives it is trained and it grows until it looks up and sees its Lord and becomes free. So the two birds, we'll read this and pause with this. The dual being. There are two beings in my single self. A Godhead watches nature from behind. At play in front with a brilliant surface elf. Aurobindo has used the word elf. It's not a very, good word that way. Elf means little pygmy, that kind of a being, creature. At play in front with a brilliant surface self. Nature is playing with that. A time-born creature with a human mind. Tranquil and boundless like a sea or sky, the Godhead knows himself, eternity's Son. That is the central being, the Jivatma, deep within, knows itself that I am the divine's child. Radiant his mind and vast, his heart as free as the Lord is, as the Supreme is. His will is a sceptre of dominion. The smaller self, by nature's passions driven, thoughtful and erring, learns his human task. All must be known and to that greatness given, his mind and life, the mirror and the mask. So this part which is free, radiant above, knows the script and it slowly trains this part which is struggling and identified through lives to tune its steps to the eternal and the infinite. As with the figure of a cymbal dance, the screened omniscient plays at ignorance. Namaste. So this question is based on the poem we have read, Dual Being. That what is the difference between psychic being and the central being? Ordinarily, we only hear about Jivatma. So there is the Jivatma, and in traditional yoga, it is described as when it is turned towards this world and nature, then it forgets the Lord. And when it turns away from nature toward the Lord, then it knows itself that I am child of the eternal. But in Aurobindo yoga, as he explains to us, as is revealed as a fact of experience, that when the central being is that portion which is always free above time and space, it always knows itself as the child of the eternal. It has not entered the play. It contains the original script. But it brings out of itself a portion which enters into the play and identifies with it. So the image can be of the sun and the rays. So we can take only for this purpose the image of the sun as the central being which is above time and space. And the psychic being as the ray which has entered into the play mixes with the mud and becomes muddy ray. It identifies with aspects of nature, portions of nature, and completely forgets itself because it has entered into time and space. Now, this is necessary even for the formation of a sense of ego individuality. Otherwise, it's like a mass. So, in animals, there is no psychic being as such. So, animals don't have a consciousness of individuality. It is only as the psychic being develops that even the ego individuality, it's like its light little falls and it illumines a portion which then one thinks this is me. It's like when the, let's say the moonbeam illumines a path in the dark ocean and you think this ocean is me or this portion is mine. There is a lot of darkness all around. So same way, because of the psychic presence, there is the crystallization of aspects of nature and it constructs the sense of ego, that this is me. But this construct behind it is the psychic presence which supports it. Otherwise, there will be no construct at all. The sign of growing individuality is also the sign that the psychic being inside is growing. And a time comes when this ego individuality begins to feel stifled because it senses that there is a greater presence behind. So that's the time when within this ego individuality with which the psychic being is identified, begins to aspire for God, for light, for freedom, meaning of life, purpose of creation. That's when it is ready to discover itself. And when it discovers itself, then it turns behind. So you see the steps are similar, but there is a slight difference. So then it turns behind and sees that, oh, I am that always portion of the eternal. What does it do then? Now, in a traditional yoga, because this dual distinction is not there, when the Jivatma turns, it knows it's the Lord. Why should it play here? But here it is that there is a reason why the central being had sent this little ray to become the psychic being, and that purpose is to divinize matter, to change it into life divine. That is the aspiration it carries. But for that, it must first forget itself. Otherwise, it always, you see, if you want to change people in a tribe, you have to start living like them, becoming like them. You have to for a while veil the entire knowledge. Who are you? From where you are coming? Then you become one. They have confidence in you. So over a period of time, this psychic presence is completely identified itself. And then after some time, because it is ultimately a portion of the divine, so its contact begins to change things till a time comes when everything is ready and you feel no, there is something greater, and we turn towards experiencing this inner truth. So the Jivatma has two portions. One is which is above time and space. It always knows itself as the Lord, as the child of the Lord, portion of the Lord. Another portion, same, eternal, immortal, portion of the eternal and immortal, enters into the play and plays at dying and birth. It cannot be destroyed because that is also eternal, immortal. So it cannot be destroyed, but it enters and looks like destroyed, as if it has perished with the bodily frame. But it will come back again. So it goes back, comes back. But the central being doesn't go and come back. It watches from above the entire journey which is going on. The central being has all the original script. It is the burning witness in the sanctuary. That is how Sri Aurobindo describes. All the life stories, threads are there with it. The psychic forgets. That's how it starts leading this life is ultimately mine. But it can recover all this knowledge. The day it looks behind, becomes one with the central being, that portion which is always free, it recovered the entire story. Acha, acha. So many times I have died or passed through the portals of death. Then it has no fear. Then it plays the game only for the joy of the play, plays the role, plays it very well, knows that it is part of the play to play the role very well. That's all that is given to it. Okay, is that clear? Namaste.